Hi, my name is Craig Wiggins, and this is the SCORM-to-TLA Roadmap and the implications for HR. I'm sorry, guys, this was supposed to happen on the Back to the Future Day, but I had to reshoot this video, so this is happening on Halloween. So, happy Halloween. Let's go ahead and get started. So I've been an instructional designer for more than 10 years. I am currently working as the community manager at ADL. ADL is the Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative. We support learning technology and many other efforts for the United States government and for the world at large. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now. So here's a picture I really like. This is a picture of Roger Hu and Jesse Chuang and myself. We are at the Experience-XAPI Bootcamp, I believe the first one ever, in 2014 in Orlando, Florida. What I like about this picture, other than showing two of my favorite people, is that at least one of the people in that picture traveled a long way to get to Orlando, Florida. I want to talk about why someone would travel so far to work with other people on a learning specification, and hopefully describe it in a way that will make you understand how useful this is, not just to learning technology geeks, let's say, but also useful to people concerned with tracking performance and therefore maximizing human resources. So a little bit about ADL first, where I work. So ADL, or Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative, was established in 1999 by a presidential executive order by President Clinton. The first two ADL collabs, or collaboratories, opened in Alexandria, Virginia, where I am right now, and Orlando, Florida, where I'll be next week. The mission for ADL is to provide access to the highest quality education and training tailored to individual needs, delivered cost effectively anywhere and anytime. It's pretty ambitious. The ADL initiative sponsors a network of collaboratories. Those collabs collaborate with the government, industry, and academia to develop and disseminate some common guidelines and lesson learns and tutorials for ADL to share those resources among all stakeholders. The ADL initiative directly funds two of the collabs, the one in Virginia and the one in Florida. In addition to the collaboratories, which are largely in the United States, there is also an ADL Partnership Lab network. Through memorandums of understanding with host countries such as Poland, Norway, Korea, Romania, New Zealand, Mexico, United Kingdom, Canada, and others. The ADL initiative recognizes a network of ADL partnership labs around the world. So those labs work in their own country and with the partnership labs in general to further ADL's vision and to help each other achieve more utility out of learning technology for their respective uses. Well, ADL works on a number of technologies, some of which I'll kind of jump through really quickly. One of those is the Learning Registry. Since 1999, ADL has worked to create or facilitate the development of several technologies, including the Learning Registry itself, which is a way to take different educational resources and put them and tag them with metadata and put them in a repository where people can search for educational content and then use it in their this open source educational content in their classrooms. In addition, or associated with the Learning Registry, is the ADL 3D repository, which is a website for uploading, finding, and downloading 3D models. Any 3D model can be uploaded, but the system's really optimized for certain file types, including FBX, DAE, etc. If you're curious about the 3D repository, you have to understand it in the context of the Virtual World Sandbox, which is a multi-user, collaborative, open-source virtual environment that lives in the cloud. We allow users to create worlds where they can interact, play, and build. The system comes with a set of authoring tools that allow you to build games or simulations and share them with the world. If you're interested in that at all, I recommend checking out sandbox.adlnet.gov. You can use the 3D repository of items within the Virtual World Sandbox environment. If you have any questions about that, please contact me. But that's not why we're here. Those are some things that ADL works on, but I think the thing that ADL is most famous for is the Shareable Content Object Reference Model, or SCORM. SCORM integrates a set of related technical standards and specifications and guidelines designed to meet um, high-level requirements. That is, being accessible, interoperable, durable, and able to reuse content and systems. Um, SCORM, as I said, is what ADL is famous for. We'll get into what it does in a moment, but suffice it to say right now that it's not a perfect specification, but what it does is it establishes predictable protocols for how online training courses and learning management systems work together. In short, if you're not already aware, SCORM is what allows your learning management system to track scores and duration of exposure and other learning events that happen in relation to distance learning or e-learning. So if you jump back to the 1990s, Laserdisc was an emerging format for technology-enhanced learning. That was the pinnacle at the time of learning on a computer. You needed to have some sort of a static medium to work with. So with the advent of the web later on in the 90s and in the and getting more popular, obviously, at the turn of the century, that created new possibilities. So SCORM was created to allow to provide an interoperability framework for web-based learning. So the SCORM model works pretty well. It has content packages that are imported into LMSs. Those content packages could be courses of e-learning. That content is then duplicated in each system. If you want to send the same content to different LMSs, you have to send a content package to each LMS. LMSs contain the content, they control access and manage the learner data. That works really well unless you have to update your content often. And I think a lot of learning management system administrators spend a lot of time getting their content to update across learning management systems, etc., especially in large organizations. I imagine some of you may have this problem. So that works well with items that are e-learning. But in the last several years, we've had an advent of other content. So we've had mobile devices, and we've had laptops, and we have portable media. But for the most part, you could still use SCORM with these items as long as they were packaged in the SCORM package. So, like I said, this worked really well. SCORM was intended for web-based content only. You had to be online all the time. The SCORM runtime environment used JavaScript, which is widely available even today to web programmers. The SCORM data model provided a means to get and set common data elements like scores, complete or incomplete, pass or fail. Just really simple information about what people are doing with courses. And of course, this solved the problem that our host organization was having, the U.S. Department of Defense and the U.S. Armed Services. The problem they were having was that they needed to be able to move courses from one LMS to another behind firewalls. And the different LMSs at the time had different protocols. SCORM made it so they could use a unified protocol. So this is great. SCORM is great. Well, mostly. So where we start running into trouble in the very beginning is that I'm sure you're familiar with the 70-20-10 rule of workplace educational development. If you're not, it is that about 70% from on-the-job experiences, tasks, and problem solving is what you're learning. You would learn 20% of what you need to know to work from feedback and working around good and bad examples of the need. And then you learn 10% of what you need to do on the job from formal courses. I would say that SCORM and similar technologies focus on that 10%, which is not enough. So moving on to today's learning environment, we are still using courses on laptops and desktops, but we're also, we need to be able to access content from any device. We need to learn using games or virtual worlds, like I was talking about earlier with the virtual world Sandbox. And we need to work with intelligent content. We need to create things that actually mold to the user. We're trying to learn from intelligent tutors. There's a lot of research that ADL is doing right now on intelligent tutoring systems and self-discovery. We're learning a lot more from mentors and peers via social networks. Social networks didn't necessarily exist at the time that SCORM was being built. Most importantly, I would say we need things that are portable and personalized and brokered. So I would say that what we're looking at here is um, while we oftentimes use the term next-gen SCORM here at ADL, really our research and development efforts are pushing towards something larger than SCORM. Uh, we are anticipating and working towards an environment in which everyone has access to all of the types of content that you see on the screen right now. Smartphone apps, tablet computing, virtual environments or simulations, MOOCs, which have become popular in the last few years, and competency-based education is of great concern to us, as is the rise of augmented reality, and of course social media. So you can see that when we talk about next generation e-learning, which is on the right, and we talk about traditional e-learning, SCORM will handle what's on the left, stuff that is part of a formal curriculum. But it does not allow cloud technologies and distributed services. It does not provide for content provided using different technologies on different platforms. It really is restricted to a few platforms, mainly the learning management system and a desktop or laptop environment. And it does not necessarily promote self-guided or individualized learning. Courses, as you're familiar with them, e-learning courses are pretty much straightforward. There may be branching associated with it if you're building a course, but which is allowed for with e-learning authoring tools, but that's not necessarily something that SCORM itself was actually built for. So what we're pushing towards is e-learning beyond a course. We'll need things, we'll need formal courses, of course, but we'll also need performance support, job aids, simulations, intelligent tutoring systems, and connections to peers and mentors. So how can we get that into what we're looking for? Obviously the questions we've been asking ourselves when looking for a replacement, or at least an extension for SCORM, are how do you know if you passed a course? How do you're using a mobile device? How would or working with a learning experience that's outside of the SCORM realm? How do you know if you satisfied a competency? How do you actually know if you're qualified for a job? And how do you let a school know that you've met your degree requirements? If there isn't one formal track for the content that you're working with, how can you prove that you've done things? So in this way, I consider SCORM to be a lot like my Korean vocabulary. I traveled to Korea in 2014 for a e-learning Korea conference, which was very enlightening for me. And in advance, I tried to learn some Korean so that I wouldn't be entirely lost while I visited. I have come to think of SCORM like my Korean vocabulary. So I can get a lot done in my Korean vocabulary if all I want to do is talk about the weather. Much like that, pass, fail, complete, incomplete, initiated, or the score, knowing these few things alone gives you an incomplete picture of a learning experience. What about what you can do to improve your designs? There's not much data for data science to occur in that case. So in response to this, ADL began to create something called the Training and Learning Architecture. This is a new ADL technical roadmap for items that we have decided are worthy of pursuit at ADL in research, and that we have started to work on in order to find next generation or encounter next generation learning pathways. So one of these items would be experience tracking. Experience tracking, very technically, is what SCORM does already. It enables tracking of experiential learning data. But we decided we needed to get to something a little deeper. We needed to be able to expose tracked data from everywhere, not just a desktop computer, but from any of the devices we talked about earlier. So hold on to this notion of experience tracking. We'll get back to it in a few minutes. We worked on content brokering, managing content to support just-in-time learning by enabling selection of the next logical activity. So it provides machines the ability to understand content for the purpose of selection and launch. So that would have to be, if I were to describe content brokering, it would be the means by which content and experiences can be identified and displayed or downloaded to the learner or content developer. This enables the delivery of the right content at the right time, Also, as learning systems get smarter, they may identify a gap in a learner's knowledge, search a content repository or registry for relevant content, remember the learning registry we were talking about earlier, and then deliver that to the learner. So content brokering really includes the description of learning resources with metadata, the aggregation of content into a cohesive unit, authentication and authorization of the user for that piece of content, and then determining the best type of content, or if the content can run on the services being used by the learner, such as an iPad or a PC or a phone. So we are working on many things in that regard, but we'll skip over this for now. It involves learner profiles, so that would be it would be providing the ability to store, retrieve, and analyze data about a learner. Learner profiles are important for tailoring content to an individual and can provide learning systems the information they need to determine what the learner really needs next. So in addition to the ability to broker content, the learner profile is part of that ability for a system to broker that content. The content needs to be tagged so that it can go somewhere, but in order to understand what the learner needs, there are certain things that need to be answered. For example, I would say that education and training is really sort of in the industrial age. It's very much a cookie cutter approach right now. Um, there's very little tailoring to individuals in our education system. People take algebra, for example, in the United States in 8th or ninth grade, not because they're necessarily ready to take it, although undoubtedly many of them are. They're doing it because they're of the age where they should be taking algebra. Maybe people should be giving content when they're ready for it. Maybe they're ready for algebra earlier than that. So, just because you're 14 and 15 years old may not mean that you uh, get to take algebra at the time. What if you're advanced at math? Maybe you can start taking it at age 12 or age 10. What if we require help to catch up to the rest of the class? Well, if you're a student who requires help, maybe you'd have to start a bit later, or maybe you need extra help so you can keep up with your class. Technology-enhanced learning can assist in filling this gap. Understanding the learner via learner profiles is a critical component. We have to consider in the training learning architecture competency networks. So competencies are the measurable or observable knowledge, skills, abilities, and behaviors critical to successful job performance. A competency network organizes competencies into a graph structure so decisions can be made on progress towards a degree, qualifications on a job, readiness for theater deployment, etc. Services and specifications that work in this area, I could actually give you a list of those after this presentation if you want to contact me. So we've talked about the four branches of the training and learning architecture. Let's talk about what we came here to talk about, which is the Experience API. The Experience API is the result of something called Project Tin Can. It was a research and development project here at ADL. We solicited assistance from the community and from some particular actors to help us develop something that would allow us to continue the work that SCORM started. So let's see if I can help you with that. It tracks experiences in formal learning experiences in addition to formal ones, real world experiences, not just completions, but just everything. It is a suite of web services that allow the reporting of learning experiences. By storing the experiences our experts have under their belt, we can help our new learners gain experiences they need to grow by looking at the streams, the things that our experts have already done. We currently do this via mentoring in the real world. Senior software engineers constantly mentor junior developers on best practices and share links about scalability, performance, and new features of languages, as they already know how to stay on top of their industry. Otherwise, they would just have been out of a job years ago as their knowledge became stale. This is informal learning and social learning at its best. This concept can also be applied to formal classroom or e-learning experiences. So the Experience API allows you to capture everything, allows for data storage and retrieval. It enables tracking via mobile, games, intelligent tutoring services, and virtual world experiences. And one of the best parts is it was developed by the open source community. So when Project Tin Can started, there were 5 requirements that we found from the community. The first is that whatever that was created through this had to support a variety of content types. It needed to be simple to implement. It should support offline and disconnected scenarios. You'll recall that I mentioned that SCORM was really made for an online environment. You needed to be connected in order to transfer information, or you needed to stay connected in order to have a learning experience. And as you and I know, there are many learning experiences that happen offline. So that was one of the requirements, that it should support offline or disconnected scenarios. Um, the solution should be allow for portable content. In other words, mobile. There should be things that should be content should be interoperable across platforms. So you should be able to start a learning experience on one device and then continue it on another, and then have the data communicated properly across those platforms. And then finally, it needed to improve the access to runtime data, which is an improvement upon SCORM. So to compare the training and learning architecture in SCORM, well, I should say that in order to accommodate this new landscape, ADL is a champion of enterprise architecture. Our vision is the TLA, and you can see that what we mostly talk about when we're talking about SCORM is that we're talking about what web browser-based instruction. And the part that is of great interest to most of the people is the runtime environment. That's what most people are talking about when they talk about SCORM. The training and learning architecture, when we're talking about dealing with content in an equivalent way, most people are concerned with the experience tracking portion of the training and learning architecture in order to allow any learning activity to happen on any platform. So the part that is of most importance is the Experience API. And this is out of the 4 parts of the TLA, the learner profiles, competencies, content brokering. The focus for the rest of this discussion will be the experience tracking portion. That would be the Experience API. So let's compare XAPI and the SCORM runtime environment. So both of these track or manage course tracking. But only the Experience API also allows you to have multiple scores per object, or unlimited test results and interactions. And with SCORM, you don't have that luxury. The Experience API is secure, and best of all, there technically isn't any learning management system required for the Experience API. Instead, the data is sent to what is called a learning record store. So there's no web browser required with the Experience API. You could have a disconnected device that doesn't have a browser. It doesn't need one. You just have to find a way to track or send Experience API statements, and we'll talk about that in a bit, from that device. As such, the Experience API supports offline scenarios. It allows you control over your content. You can outfit native applications or web apps to create Experience API statements, and as such, you can make anything work with the Experience API. That would be games or simulations, virtual worlds, informal learning, team-based learning, etc. So really quickly, we'll talk about the stream aspect of the Experience API. The experience data is stored via learning streams, which are based on the activity stream specification. This is a specification with a collaboration between Facebook and Google and Microsoft and many other industry giants to interchange social experiences in a standard format. I think we're not going to talk a lot about this right now. The part that is most important is the actor verb object triple that it was created with activity streams. So you could say, I did this. So the Experience API follows that pattern. So this is an example of a formal learning stream that you may encounter in K-12 or in higher education. Our example here is learning about the War of 1812. The learner here I'm sorry, that's actually not correct. Let's wait on that. Okay, so these are examples of formal learning streams. John Connor attempted Algebra 101. He watched a video about solving for x. So you'll notice here that the actor is John Connor, the verb is attempt, and the object is, or subject is Algebra 101, and so on. A good example here would be someone who interacted with the Steve Jobs biography. The difference in this list is that the verb and the user being reported really explains how the user interacted with the book. So let's take a look. Walter Isaacson authored the Steve Jobs biography, so Walter Isaacson would be the actor here. The verb would be author, and the object here would be the Steve Jobs biography. David proofread the biography. Margaret approved the biography. Simon and Schuster, and again, an actor in this case doesn't have to be a person. It could be an object, or it could be an organization, or a group of people, which I guess is the same thing. Simon and Schuster published the Steve Jobs biography. John purchased the Steve Jobs biography. Ted read that biography. Philip shared the biography. Stephen liked the biography, and Harry reviewed the biography. All of these actions describe interactions with this particular object, tracking people's interactions with it, and then forming a picture of how it's affected people and what people have interacted with it in ways that might count towards experiences that will be important. In this case, it's very clear that the verb is what differentiates authors and editors from publishers, readers, and reviewers. So we talked a bit earlier about what happens with the Experience API. As I said earlier, we don't need an LMS, we need an LRS, or Learning Record Store. So a Learning Record Store is the experience tracking and storage component of ADL's service-based approach to the TLA, or Training and Learning Architecture. The platform-independent LRS design allows flexibility in that it may be a standalone service or a complementary component of a traditional LMS. So as I said before, you don't need an LMS, but an LMS can receive service or XAPI statements like we were just looking at earlier about the Steve Jobs biography. It can receive them and then give them to other services. So this is how it works. The Learning Record Store is in the center here, and all of the green arrows are representative of information, XAPI information, coming from devices. So instead of coming from just the formal LMS here, as we're used to, we could have information coming from a mobile device where someone does self-reporting. There could be an app that does automatic third-party validation. You could have game systems or informal learning capture, which monitors what someone is doing in a particular environment, or any number of systems sending Experience API learning experience data to the Learning Record Store. Now you remember the statements we looked at earlier, the triples, I did this, the actor, verb, object. Those statements are being sent to the Learning Record Store chronologically and being time-stamped. In that manner, the Learning Record Store creates a picture of interaction with content. So SCORM, if we remember, is effective in describing how a learner's active session, that would be the current session when they're sitting down at a computer with learning content, passes learning data to an LMS. However, SCORM does not currently describe how or if the LMS displays the data to the learner. This situation means the people who need the data the most may not have access to it. For example, a course administrator may not be able to access scores for all learners in a course. The LMS stores the data, but SCORM doesn't specify how the LMS should expose it. So what you're looking at on screen here are all the things that an LMS does, which are a lot of things. It manages statistics, it manages sequencing as part of the specification. It obviously engages in course management and scheduling. Maybe the LMS that you have includes a gradebook, and it obviously does assessment. It may have its own video or player or content player. It may store preferences for users and account management, and obviously there's reporting. The one bit that we really care about, and the part that actually corresponds to what the Experience API does, or is done with the Learning Record Store, I should say, are managing or tracking and storing learning records. It's the only part that we actually care about here. So, the LRS only cares about the learning records. So, if you're managing all of this information from any device, you could say that Experience API is great. It's it's the next generation of SCORM. Well, not exactly. I will say that it is not an exaggeration to say that the XAPI is an answer to a lot of the suggestions and the frustrations of the e-learning community. Even so, it's proved very difficult for e-learning instructional designers to get started with the specification. For example, just telling someone, like I'm telling you right now, that they're free of traditional constraints is not enough. Most people don't realize how much the familiar system of single learner e-learning courses with one quiz scored and recorded in an LMS shapes their ability to come up with new and unconventional performance support solutions. I would say that LMSs shape those instructional designers' ability to come up with new and unconventional performance support solutions. What you're working on right now, or what your instructional designers are working on right now, is very much shaped by what is possible with a learning management system, and a lot of that is possible because of what SCORM allows. So many designers and developers that we've talked to over the years within organizations can see the potential of the Experience API, but they have a lot of money and expertise invested in SCORM. This makes it hard to maneuver into something new, even if the learning and development case can be made. For example, distributed learning, mobile performance support tools without a learning management system, etc. The rise of rapid authoring tools and light learning management systems have empowered many learning designers to become one-man or one-woman shops, handling everything, the design, the development, the script writing, etc. I'd say personally, as an instructional designer, that this makes it less likely to be the case if they're working with the Experience API, which for now requires the services of a developer familiar with JSON and JavaScript and other technologies. So while the Experience API is a really good good answer to a lot of the problems that the community put out there, people who are used to working in the e-learning world have a few things to learn to be able to become really comfortable with it. So in this manner, the Experience API can be a pipe dream for many of those who would like to get started. So I guess it's a good question to ask, what is ADL doing about this? Well, we've been trying to get back out into the community. That picture you saw of Roger Hu and Jesse Chuang and myself from the beginning of this presentation was from our earliest boot camp. ADL has been putting on boot camps where we get a bunch of people together in one location and have a bunch of workshops about the Experience API and other technologies. There's a picture here from that first boot camp in Orlando. We have Experience API design cohorts. We have currently done 3 seasons of the Experience API design cohort. So we are, we're at a position now where we get a bunch of people together online, over time zones, and they group together and work on projects associated with the Experience API. And in doing those projects, they learn about how working with XAPI is best done. They exchange best practices. They gain information from working with other people. I'm probably not explaining this as well as I could. I'm sure that Jessie would be better at this, as she's a multiple-time participant and very valuable player in the Experience API design cohorts that we've had. And so I want to thank Jessie for that. The ADL has encouraged the growth of the XAPI community of practice and profile groups. So many groups that are focused on particular aspects of learning technology or just use instructional design. So using video or using augmented reality or simulations. They're trying to find best practices for using the Experience API. One in particular is one group that's working in particular is the XAPI Vocabulary Working Group, led by my colleague Jason Haig. That group works to find the best way for communities of practice who are working on specific best practice areas for with the XAPI to work with the verbs or to collect a verb list that best suits that particular domain. So you remember I was talking about the triple that makes up the Experience API, the I did this. We need to spend some time collecting a list of verbs that work well within the context of, say, working with video. There are many questions to be answered there, and one of those is, how do we describe actions? Or the best way to do that is through a verb. The XAPI Vocabulary Working Group is together trying to make sure that people have the right tools to do that, and they should be reporting on their findings soon. Additionally, we've been working with industry associations to write articles. We've worked with a few organizations in the recent past to write articles about how to work with the Experience API, how to have developers and designers properly understand their roles when working with the XAPI, and how to achieve buy-in within an organization. And obviously, we worked to get the word out by talking to interested parties like yourselves. We've made some headway, but it's still not enough. What we found is that many designers, developers, and learning managers still don't know where to start or why they should use the Experience API, or how things or how things are supposed to happen. That's been a big problem. It's one of the reasons we have been pushing things like the Experience API Plug Fest that we'll be holding, or that we held at the end of last year, and that we hope to hold in the near future. So we decided to do something totally different. So the next item is the move from centering learning management control in the LMS to the LRS. Not that we're getting rid of the LMS, the learning management system, but we'd like to extend its capabilities using the LRS. So we created something called the SCORM XAPI, the SCORM TLA Roadmap. The SCORM TLA Roadmap describes 4 phases for transitioning to a service-based learning platform. So if you're currently using SCORM right now for e-learning, then you're at phase 0. And in a moment, we will talk about the characteristics of the next phases. So again, if you're in phase 0, you're working with SCORM version 1.2 or 2004 3rd edition, etc. This phase is where most people who work with e-learning are right now. You'll have an individual learner. They send data to an LMS, which authenticates given login, that delivers content back to the learner, but that information is communicated to the LMS via SCORM, which is tracking the action. So this stage is for you if the LMS is the immutable center of your organization's learning architecture. If you rely on authoring tools or content developers that create SCORM content solely, if you need to protect investments in existing SCORM conformant content, or if your learning or training is particularly or solely web-based and single learner oriented, this is definitely for you. Now, the benefits of just using SCORM are that you're probably already doing this right now. So investment in this case would be minimal. SCORM is widely adopted, so there are many tools available that use SCORM formats. More importantly, designers know how to design for SCORM systems, whether they know it or not. If they're using authoring tools, then they're definitely doing that. Working with SCORM requires little to no change to the current practices. Again, you're already doing it. And it is a mature specification. It's stable without frequent changes. There's no real way to transition to this phase. You're already here. If you're not, you should probably check out our website, adlnet.gov/SCORM, but chances are you're already here. So, phase 1 is the SCORM X or SCORM LMS-Centric. So there are 2 parts to what we call the dual track. Phase 1 use a SCORM environment, that would be SCORM 1.2 or 2004, to manage all aspects of a course in addition to XAPI tracking. The reason we call it dual tracking is that you're still using SCORM to track everything you need, but you're starting to use XAPI to replicate that tracking. The XAPI SCORM profile, which we've created, can be used to track every call made by the shareable content object to the LMS via the SCORM API. This results in records of learning experiences in the LMS and the LRS. So let's talk about this phase for a moment. So the individual learner does what we did before, sends information to the LMS. That content goes through, is communicated by SCORM back to the LMS and also to the learner. But at the same time, the learner accesses content wherever it is. That is communicated via the Experience API to the learning record store. The same with any actions that are happening with the LMS. At the same time, grouped learners or mentors who want to monitor the action can do so on this side. So this phase is for you if the LMS is all important still, but the data reporting that you're getting is not really what you want. Remember, SCORM is a content package, and you want to work with those, so you still need the LMS. The benefits to using this are that you're still using SCORM to launch the content, and that you're tracking still in SCORM, so you're not really changing a lot, but you are sending things to the via XAPI, hence the dual tracking. So a good way to start working from here is to acquire a learning management system, start reporting to the LMS and the LRS, and then follow the SCORM XAPI profile. For more information about how to do that, definitely check out our website, adlnet.gov. phase 2 is the LRS-centric phase. So we just talked about the LMS-centric phase where you're focusing on what you're doing with the LMS. Now we're making it so that you're beginning to reduce your reliance on the LMS, but you still contain an LMS due to existing investments and interfaces with other systems. Launch of the content is managed by a system other than the LMS. So that could be anything out there. That could be a web server, or it could be mobile devices, or it could just be a server. The LMS is involved, but it's part of a larger network of activity providers. So this is the first server-side requirement and potentially incurs cost, either financial or human resources. This is the phase where you start to make some real changes to your system, whereas before, we were just dual tracking, sending some information off, but we were still doing things the same way. So let's take a look at how things work. You could have a group or a mentor or an administrator or an individual authenticate to an activity, whatever that activity is. It could be something on a mobile phone, or maybe on a tablet, or on a smart device, or iPhone, or iWatch, or Apple Watch, sorry. You'll authenticate to a learning record store. At the same time, you have information which is from the LMS, which is being tracked by SCORM. That would be from this content here. That is also going to the LRS. Again, the LRS is the center of your experience tracking at this point. But at the same time, you're sending information via XAPI to that learning record store. So all of this is interconnected, but the real difference between this phase and the last phase is that you're focusing on the LRS and doing things in XAPI, which means you can include all the content that you want, as opposed to just focusing on e-learning. So the benefits of using this is that you're able to track data about individuals and groups and teams and instructors, or anyone you want, not just an individual learner. You can include mobile devices, simulations, and games. And again, the learning management system recedes in importance at this point. A good way to get here is to have your learning management system, which would be over here, pull data from the LRS, which is happening. Getting the content to start, or rather the content at this point begins to not need to report directly back to the LMS. Remember, the LMS in this case is not the center of all of your learning experience tracking. The learning record store is via the Experience API. Finally, you want to determine content and user access authentication. That might be tricky. In these phases, in this part here, you're really going to start to need some development and system management expertise. Finally, there's phase 3. So we don't know what phase 3 is going to be. Phase 3 could be whatever you have in the future. Now, in phases 0, 1, and 2, we've presupposed you're already working with a learning management system, and that learning management system follows a certain pattern of necessity as dictated by SCORM, and then additionally as dictated by the Experience API. But what if you don't have a requirement to work with SCORM materials? So this phase here, which again, we don't really know what it would look like yet, this phase would be for you if your organization doesn't have an existing learning management system platform. And then you have the ability and the resources to design exactly what addresses the problem. And that's what we want to do here, is try to design learning experiences that actually address the problem directly, the performance issue that you're having. The benefits here is that you're free to select whatever is best. You have responsiveness inherent in whatever you design. And you have access to as much learner experience data as you can mine. Remember, in the example that we have here, everyone authenticates into the LRS to get the information they need. That information is being reported from any of the content they have here via the Experience API to the LRS, and then reported from the LRS to whoever needs that information. How to get there? Well, not quite sure yet. Maybe you can tell us. So some examples of how to use the Experience API in the real world for purposes that would be helpful in human resources would be to work with open badges. If you haven't heard, open badges are ways to show digitally whether someone has achieved a certain competency or has had a learning experience that needs to be commemorated. So it's like a certification of some kind. There is a community of practice right now working to use the Experience API to communicate information about learning experiences and their connection to open badges. So having open badges and the Experience API And achievement recognized by national trade certifications means that someone can have a virtual backpack of experiences that they carry around with them or that is accessible online. And this is all facilitated using the Experience API. You can check the URL at the bottom of the page for more information about this. Another good example of how the Experience API works in the workplace would be a cartoon shown by our friends at Float Learning. It is an interactive cartoon, and I urge you to go to the URL at the bottom of the page. As you click through the cartoon, you can see how the Experience API works and helps someone who is struggling at a new job learn how to do their job better, and it shows what path they took to get better. This is very important, especially for the human resources world, because it means that you're not really you're not relying on guessing whether someone understood something. You can see evidence of them understanding. More importantly, you can see evidence of them performing better, which is really what we're trying to do with learning. So if you'd like to get involved, there are several ways. I'll probably jump back to that in a minute. I'm going to answer some questions that we have here. I know that we are looking forward to sharing some more activities that we're putting on with you. But if you'd like to get involved, there are several ways. There are links on screen. I definitely recommend that you check out these resources. Some of them are just XAPI resources, things that we've done that we've tried to share with you. Others are the history of our XAPI design cohort or the communities of practice and profile groups. You can also check out the actual specification for the XAPI if you're interested. That's available at our GitHub, which is the link to which is at the bottom of the screen here. I'm going to answer a few questions before we go. So the first question that I got is, what's happening in the XAPI community this year? Well, so this is I want to say the third year that I've been involved in the XAPI community directly. And what we tend to do every year is to start working on the Experience API design cohort, which I described earlier. So many ADL is looking into doing that again, but we actually are thinking that other people are going to start taking on the responsibility of putting on a design cohort. There's a rumor that that's happening now, and well, I'll have more information for you about that in the future. But other than that, there are many other things happening in the XAPI community in general, and not associated with ADL. So we're very happy to have groups of people around the world who are working on the specification, and we've made a lot of headway, and people are starting to use the Experience API to do many interesting things. People have started to integrate it into learning e-learning authoring tools. So using tools like Captivate or Articulate Storyline, or others, or like Tora. If you use those tools to create e-learning, you're able to start working with the Experience API instead of just working with SCORM and LMSs. This is on the road to abstracting, the Experience API away from having to understand so much about the specification and working with tools. Although that's a little problem, that may be a bit problematic in the short term. I have faith that in the long run, that's going to be something really interesting. There's a lot of writing happening right now with the Experience API, but maybe the most important thing that's happening right now is that people who understand the spec are actually getting out there at conferences and other places in the world to start using the Experience API to really produce actionable learning analytics. And I think this is really something that is underrated in the world of human resources right now, and in learning in particular. I would say that a lot of times we focus too much on what people learn as opposed to what they know what they can do, whether that's because they know it or because they have instructions. So I think that there are a lot more people working right now in the community this year to produce performance support using the Experience API. There are several organizations who have started to work with XAPI. There are several companies who are creating native applications using XAPI, and that's really exciting this year. And then finally, there's things like the XAPI Camp and a few other events that are happening around the world where people get a chance to get hands-on experience with the XAPI and learn about what it's all about. What's the killer application of XAPI in my opinion? Well, there's some really interesting stories out there. There is a organization that has worked, for example, to use sensors to detect biohazardous waste in an area or dangers to people, and then send that information, that biohazard information or the information about the hazardous material, to people in different using different systems in a way that would really be difficult using something like SCORM. You can create scenarios. One of the best examples of using the Experience API that I've seen is for marksmanship training. So there's a company that ADL has worked with that um, has worked to create training for people who are learning how to shoot within the U.S. Armed Services. Um, Currently, what people tend to do is they have marksmanship range rather, and they have a proctor off to the side who's watching them perform. The people who are trying to learn how to shoot properly are lined up in the range, and they shoot at the targets, and then they score the proximity or the hit pattern based on what's happened, and they score the form based on what the proctor saw. A lot of that is done via paper or through very dedicated systems. But what if you could have a system that would use a common learning experience data format to express what's happening? Well, that's what we did, or that's what that company did in conjunction with ADL. So they created a project called Reaper, which um, it uses the Experience API to track the accuracy and the not only the accuracy of the shooting, but also reporting from the proctors, etc. It's really interesting. I definitely recommend you check it out. If you're interested in that, please contact me and I'll get you some information about it. But I think the real killer application of XAPI, in my opinion, is tracking offline experiences where you're learning to do some physical activity, and that information is getting sent back to some sort of repository, a learning record store, and then shared with whatever system there is. So, really, in that vein, that also applies to simulations. Um, really, simulations, understanding what happens in a simulation, or even a video game, if one is being used for learning, it's very difficult to score or understand if someone's learning how to do things better. You may be able to devise ways of understanding whether they're doing things better, but how do you capture those activities that can then be reported as improvement or deepening one's knowledge or experience? Well, you can do that now with the Experience API in simulations. In fact, we have a community of practice dedicated to doing that. So those are just a couple of those things. I think a really good example of that would be um, a recent project that was done with a local hospital and fire and rescue team and some members of the XAPI community. They worked with that hospital to figure out what was happening from a crash site or an accident scene all the way into the AR. So at all the stages, or I'm sorry, from the crash scene all the way to the ER, to the emergency room. So finding out what happens, when emergency services arrives on an accident site, how long it takes them to get to the body, what happens when they're in the ambulance, how long it takes, whether proper procedures were administered. All of those things can be measured if you plan properly and then transferred from devices that are used to a learning record store that can be in proximity within an ambulance, etc. And that can continue all the way into the operating room where you can continue to see what doctors are doing to people who are being treated there. In this way, instead of just using cameras or some other ways to try and figure out what doctors are doing or what people in the ambulance are doing, you're able to get a much fuller picture of things people might be doing right or things might be doing wrong. And this is really the strength of XAPI, really revealing what it is that people are doing. So I can talk all day about this, but I'll try and keep it more brief. Final question. What is ADL's plan for the future of XAPI and building up TLA? Well, that's a good question. Um, I don't know if I can speak to ADL's plan right now, but I can say that one of the things we like to do, or that ADL would like to do with XAPI, is to continue our efforts to make sure that the other parts of the TLA, other aspects of just next generation learning, whether it's the training and learning architecture or something else, that we're able to properly address what the world of learning and performance improvement needs. understanding, being able to have content that is recommended for someone, and then having paths of success that can be looked at by people. Those are very simple concepts, but I think the more people are working with XAPI and the more the instructional designers become familiar with it, the more likely we are to get the kind of learning experiences that we want in learning ecosystems, in fact, and the kind of reporting that we want. The kind of things that we're looking for are, in the end, I would say, predictive analytics, content brokering, suggestion or recommender engines, all things that we're considering right now. I can't speak authoritatively about those things right now or ADL's plans, as that is really for the director of ADL to say. But I can say that we're very happy about the way that XAPI has already started to make a difference in the way that people are designing experiences. So thank you to everyone, especially to Jesse Chuang, for having me here. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me.